Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight on our news. A man murdered on the job in broad daylight.
Former Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham lashes out on the current state of the economy. That story is coming up tonight, straight ahead.
The Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister respond to accusations about campaign finances. That story, straight ahead.
Our news is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Christina McNeil. Topping news tonight, a man believed to be in his early 40s became the country's latest murder victim today. Police say the victim, who was at work, was gunned down by a man who fled the scene right after the shooting. Officer in charge of the Central Detective Unit, Clayton Fernander, gave reporters details on the scene. The victim's body was still on the scene when the media arrived. The car the victim drove to work was also riddled with bullets, and according to Fernander, the victim was known to police and was in and out of the system.
He was here as a construction worker on this job site just behind me, along with a number of other employees. This is an open area, as you can see, when a lone gunman entered the building and shot him to the body and fled on foot.
According to Fernander, police will be launching a full investigation into this matter, but in his opinion, it's clear the victim was the target.
We don't know the motive at this time. The big question is what went wrong. It appears though he was the target because there was a number of other employees working in this area and the gunman approached him and shot him. So something went wrong. That is the line of inquiry that we are following as we speak. You can see officers, we are speaking to some of the workers who was present during the time of the shooting.
Bishop Simeon Hall, who was on the scene, says the government, the community, and the courts now have to declare war on crime. According to Hall, the death of two teenagers followed by a brazen daytime murder scream that offenders have lost respect for the law.
I think the government made a mistake when it redid the law in terms of gun possession. You remember, it was put to the judge's discretion. I think a 25-year automatic penalty for gun possession, especially when it is used in the committal when you're committing crime.
Meanwhile, following the shooting deaths of two teenage boys in Yellow Elder Gardens over the weekend, Prime Minister Perry Christie said he is not afraid to admit that crime is a difficult and complex issue that his government must continue to deal with aggressively. While addressing young voters during the Progressive Liberals town hall meeting at the University of the Bahamas on Sunday, Christie said his administration cannot afford to compromise on crime.
We are not afraid to admit that this is a difficult and complex issue, and we are continuing to deal with it aggressively because we have to. It is to do with the future of our country and the future security of our country, to do with people wanting to come to our country, and young men with a complete disregard for their own existence and the existence of others do not have the right to compromise on the integrity and the reputation and the future of young people in our country.
Two teen boys were found shot to death on a track road off Graham Drive shortly after 9 a.m. Sunday, bringing the country's count for the year to 37 at the time. Christie said crime is bigger than any political party.
To look at the police reports and see two young men headshot last night, we cannot allow this to continue. This is bigger than the FNM, it's bigger than the PLP, it's bigger than the DNA. This is about our country. And we must not compromise in our efforts.
In other news, the Progressive Liberal Party has received heavy criticism from the opposition over the state of the economy, with increasing national debt, job losses, and rising concerns surrounding the expenditure of value-added taxes. While questions remain unanswered, former Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham says the PLP must be more transparent. Giorgio Bain reports.
Former Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham says while the PLP has taken many shots at the F&M government while it was under his leadership, he feels as though there is no comparison between his government and the current administration, especially in terms of accountability.
I think we both are, right?
Yeah. With that famous laugh that many have grown to miss, former Prime Minister and leader of the Free National Movement, Hubert Ingraham, sat down for a rare interview on Bahamas at sunrise this morning. Since taking a step back from the political spotlight after being voted out in 2012. During this interview, Ingraham vented his frustrations on the current state of the economy.
Well, I don't know very much about the current state because the government is not very transparent in its dealings, and it doesn't make available very much information on a public basis. The Minister of Finance, the State Minister of Finance, was on the radio the other day, and he was asked a very basic question about the VAT and the expenditure for VAT. And he seemed to have been challenged to respond to the question.
Following the Progressive Liberal Party's convention, the topic of where the VAT money has gone has been a controversial topic, and according to Ingraham, the truth is it was never meant to be anything else but a revenue-raising measure.
The State Minister of Finance was on the radio the other day, and he was asked a very basic question about the VAT and the expenditure for VAT. And he seemed to have been challenged to respond to the question, you know. The reality, though, is that there has been there's a feeling in this society that the value-added tax, VAT, was a tax that was going to be used to pay down the government debt. Well, that is how it was sold to the public. But the truth is, it was a revenue-raising measure.
When asked about the rising national debt, the former Prime Minister explained it would not be a problem if the Bahamian people were able to see where the money is going.
The national debt, in and of itself, doesn't present a challenge in a society if people can see where the money is going and what the money is being used for. When you continue to increase the debt and you are unable to touch, feel, and see what the money is being spent on.
He said there is no doubt this government has some questions to answer, especially when people compare what has happened under the last Ingraham administration.
So the government does have answers to give as to why the debt has increased to such an extent over the last 4.5 to 5 years. I mean, they blamed us for many things. But the reality is that if you take the amount of money that they borrowed over the last 4.5 years and compare it to what the F&M borrowed in the 5 years it was in office, even while the Great Recession took place in 2008 and government's revenue just, the bucket just dropped out, the expenditure just skyrocketed, and the rest of it, etc. If you take those two periods and you see what it is that the F&M left in place from the monies it borrowed, and you compare it to now, you'll have to ask the question, wow, what is this all about? I don't expect much to happen from the present government. I think they like regulations, quite frankly. I hope that if they're not there, the government that comes in will be more inclined towards reducing it, you know.
Reporting for our news, I'm Giorgio Bain.
Well, Prime Minister Perry Christie has grounded Free National Movement Chairman Sidney Colley's claim that his administration is using taxpayer money to fund the PLP's campaign efforts as fake news. This as Deputy Prime Minister Philip Brave Davis called the accusations ignorant. Our Jasmine Brown spoke to both men and filed this report.
Both the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister accused Colley of trying to stir the pot during a politically intense time.
They put out false information and fake news on the Progressive Liberal Party. It's the government of the Bahamas that must defend itself. The government of the Bahamas was elected, by the people who we would wish to protect when it comes to our revenue. But part of the protection is not allowing lies to be institutionalized through fake and false information.
In a statement issued over the weekend, Colley pointed specifically to an ad for the Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Science Institute, which bears the PLP's logo. He accused the government of treating tax dollars as if it was its own personal slush fund. Davis defended the ad and accused the FNM of trying to score cheap political points.
Well, it's nonsense. I think what those who spouse such foolishness ought to be able to discern between what is government and what is politics. Well, they have made BAMC political because they have not embraced it. In fact, they would prefer to point to anything negative coming out of it than what the positive it is contributing to our upliftment as a people. And so if they make it political, it is one of the signature initiatives by this government, so why should we not tout it as such?
Christie and Davis are not the only PLPs to reply to Colley's comments. PLP Chairman Bradley Roberts has said the party will not be distracted with the sideshows and mudslinging tactics of the FNM. Christie agreed, insisting the FNM chairman should know better than to make such wild accusations.
We are a matured party. Mr. Colley should know. He should know personally, he should know personally the maturity of this government. You let him hear me say that. He should know personally the maturity of my government.
Reporting for our news, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Meantime, with Bahamians ages 18 to 25 making up the largest group of registered voters, the Prime Minister sought to persuade young voters that FNM leader Dr. Hubert Minnis is not Prime Minister material. Bonnie Toot reports.
When voters mark their X on Election Day, Prime Minister Christie says they have a simple choice to make between a leader who can speak with authority about the country's policies or a leader with no vision, no ideas, and an inability to articulate his views. It was a clear jab at Free National Movement leader Dr. Hubert Minnis, who has often been portrayed by members of the governing party as the weak leader of a fractured party.
You can't camouflage a leader who can't come here and talk in this way. You can't hide him, you can't disguise him. And if you can't get him to do it, then you know what you can't get. You can't get ability. You can't get loyalty to ideas and vision.
Christie, who fielded questions from young voters during a town hall meeting hosted by the Progressive Young Liberals on Sunday, asserted that the country has changed and leaders must adapt to those changes.
We are facing a country where the leaders of our country will go abroad and someone will put a microphone in front of them. They can't hide. You have to be able to speak with authority on behalf of your country. It's serious. Who are our leaders? And are they capable when they land in Singapore and CNN says, Mr. Fitzgerald, what do you think, or how do you contrast the economy of Singapore and that of the Bahamas? Okay?
Christie's latest attack on Minnis' leadership style comes days after he told reporters that voters should be frightened at the thought of the FNM leader as Prime Minister. He added that the Killarney MP, who was ousted as leader of the official opposition by his own parliamentary team, has not demonstrated any degree of capacity to govern.
So when you look at the Progressive Liberal Party and the slate of candidates we've been able to put forth, the leader and prime minister of the party, I think the choice really is clear at the end of the day what the difference is, and we would encourage everyone to really look closely at the choices that you have.
The aim of Sunday's meeting was to convince young voters why they should vote for the PLP. Reporting for our News, I'm Vonique Tood.
Still to come on our News, parliamentarians debate bills designed to better protect workers. Plus, the Prime Minister fires back at organizers of We March Bahamas. That's coming up when our News returns.